many people are of the opinion that scientists can make direct measurements using this techniques of billions of years ages for rocks. And they use this then to discredit the history of the Bible. And this is really not the case. The physics behind radiometric dating is relatively straightforward. We have a radioactive element called a parent, which transforms over time into a non-radioactive element called the daughter. And this happens with a characteristic rate referred to as a half-life. That's the length of time that it takes half the parent element to transform into an equal amount of the daughter element. So over time, the amount of parent in the rock decreases and the amount of daughter in the rock increases. The scientists can use very powerful machines to measure either directly the amounts of these two elements or their ratio, and this ratio then can be used in a theoretical calculation along with the half-life to calculate an alleged age for the sample. Let me give you some examples. Radioactive carbon-14 decays to nitrogen-14. Uranium decays to lead. Potassium-40 decays to argon-40. And all of these are used in radiometric dating.
We don't actually measure the age with these methods. We actually are measuring the amount of these isotopes in the rocks or fossils. And it's an interpretation using certain assumptions about these amounts that give us the age. But the age is actually not measured directly.
For many radiometric dating techniques, one of the assumptions is that there is no daughter element present in the rock when it is formed, which of course we can't know unless we're actually there and can take a sample of the rock immediately after it was formed and do an analysis. Now, a small amount of daughter present at the time the rock is formed, if the rock is actually billions of years old, will not have a very significant impact on the calculated age. But if the rock is actually only a few thousand years old, even a very, very tiny amount of daughter present at the time the rock is formed will have a huge impact and give the rock appearances of being billions of years old. Another assumption in radiometric dating is that the rate at which the parent element transforms to the daughter element has been constant over time. Now, this has generally been borne out by experiments in the past, but recently some scientists in the US and Europe determined that the transformation rate of at least some elements, notably cobalt-60, cesium-137, silicon-32, and radium-226, do indeed vary with time. Now, they don't understand why this is, but they have noted that the rate varies with the distance between the Earth and the Sun. Now, the importance of this with respect to radiometric dating is that the assumption that the transformation rate is constant is clearly not true in the short term, and therefore may well be not true in the long term, which of course would invalidate the calculated ages. Some additional evidence for this is an experiment that was spearheaded by the Institute for Creation Research, in which some scientists found zircon crystals with unexpectedly large amounts of helium in them. Now, helium is a byproduct of the decay of uranium-238 to lead-206. And based on the ratio of lead to uranium in these zircon crystals, the calculated radiometric age was 1.5 billion years. But helium escapes from these crystals very quickly. So if the crystals really were 1.5 billion years old, then essentially all of the helium should have escaped. So the large amounts of helium that were found indicate that the crystals can't be 1.5 billion years old, and maybe the transformation from uranium to lead-206 was faster in the past. A third assumption is that the rock has remained a closed system from the time of its formation. What that means is that no parent element or daughter element has been either added to or removed from the rock during its history by any number of potential chemical or physical processes. For radiometric dating to be valid, all of these assumptions must be true. If they are not, the results are not reliable.
The standard way that an old-age geologist provides a date for a fossil, say that dinosaurs died out 65 million years old, is not by dating the fossil itself, but by dating the rocks that are nearby the fossil and using the dates of the rocks as a bracket. They'll use radioactive dating methods to say that this rock is 65 million years old, there's dinosaurs underneath them, therefore the dinosaurs can be no younger than 65 million years old. An interesting question to ask would be whether or not radioactive dating methods that are applied to the fossils actually correspond to the radioactive dating methods that apply to the rocks. If the two are in agreement, then perhaps an old age geologist has a strong argument for the age of fossils. But if you get two different ages for things that are supposed to be the same age, then either one is right, the other is right, or neither one is correct.
Many people think carbon dating can be used to date things that are millions or even billions of years old. However, because of its half-life, carbon dating can only be used theoretically to date things that are at most a few tens of thousands of years old. Because after that length of time, so much of the carbon-14 is decayed that there's not enough of it left to be detected, even with today's modern instruments.
If the whole Earth was pure carbon-14, it could only last about 1 million years before it's all gone and we couldn't detect it. And yet, we repeatedly find carbon-14 in objects which are claimed to be millions and even billions of years old, including diamonds. But the fact that we're finding carbon-14 shows they can't be millions or billions of years old. So carbon-14 is in fact a very strong ally of the biblical timescale and strong evidence against the millions of years of evolution.
What dating of fossils has shown us over time is that there is carbon-14 in the fossil material. This is true whether or not they are fossils of mosasaurs, or fossils of seashells, or fossils of petrified wood, or any of the varieties of fossil fuels that we have, especially coal and oil and natural gas. Samples of these have been analyzed since the 1970s and consistently show us ages that there shouldn't be if they were in fact millions of years old. Coal is a particularly interesting case for carbon-14. Coal is the remains of plants that have been compressed, and so they were part of the ecosystem and had an active connection to carbon-14. It's found globally, and it's found throughout the geological record. When creation scientists sampled coal seams from different places and analyzed them for the amount of carbon-14, they found that regardless of where they were collected or from what layers of geology they were found, they all registered statistically the same amount of carbon-14. So with the coal seams, rather than providing evidence of gradual deposition and formation of coal over tens or hundreds of millions of years, the identical amounts of carbon-14 in all of the samples that were collected actually shows that they were all buried within the recent past.
Even though radiometric dating seems like a very scientific process, we've seen from measurements that it produces highly erroneous results. And due to the unknowable assumptions that are behind its normal application, it is unreliable and untrustworthy in many cases.